So my friend Von Glitschka reached out to me with a question on Illustrator. Von's an incredible illustrator, and he was working on a project, and he was trying to get a certain effect, and he sent me this file. He had this shape over here, and he was filling it with a gradient, and then he wanted to apply a stroke on it, and Illustrator now allows you to apply gradients to strokes. So he wanted to apply a stroke and then apply the same gradient that he's using in the fill to the stroke. But you can see over here that the actual gradient itself kind of goes from black to this color right here, but it goes in a different direction on the stroke itself. And he wanted the stroke and the fill to both have the exact same gradient applied to it with the exact same settings. So not just the same colors of the gradient, but the direction that the gradient is going in. And you know that, for example, in Illustrator now, you have a gradient tool where you can click on an object and you can set the shape or the direction or the size or the scale of the gradient. That works on fills, but there's no way to use this tool on a stroke to get the stroke to match the exact same setting. So he was a little frustrated with that. So he asked if there's a way to make that happen. So as I looked at this, my first question really to him was, tell me more about exactly what it is that you're trying to do. Like, why do you feel that the stroke and the fill needs to be the same, exact same setting? And to be honest with you, my reason for asking that is because if you took this shape right now and you simply made it larger by doing, let's say, an offset path, so the shape was larger, meaning that it now includes the width of the stroke, why would that not be the exact same effect? Like, why do you need to apply the gradient to a stroke if the gradient itself is going to look the same as the fill? Just have a larger object that incorporates the size of the stroke, and then you're good to go. So his answer was, well, I want to apply a brush to that stroke because he was working on a stylized piece of artwork and he wanted to have like a cool like brush setting, and he wanted to apply that gradient to the brush, to which I responded, but you know that Illustrator doesn't let you apply gradients to brush strokes. See, Illustrator's ability to apply a gradient to a stroke is only when that stroke is a regular plane stroke. But if that stroke happens to have a pattern, a brush on it, there's no way to assign a specific gradient to that. It only works when using a brush with solid colors. So take a step back for a minute, and then he was like, oh, well, that doesn't help me at all. He didn't kind of jump to that point. He was just trying to first get it to match as a stroke and then turn it into a textured kind of path. So of course, there's a way we can just simply take the object, apply a brush pattern, expand it, and then fill it with a gradient. But he wanted to do this in a way where he had full control over working with different brushes and so on and so forth. So here's the solution that I provided to him, and I'm going to show you what the solution is, and then I'm going to break it down and explain to you why the solution works, because I think that is like the probably most misunderstood feature inside of Illustrator. And if you understand this, there's so many of the things that kind of come into play. So I'm going to take this shape right here that he had. Let's copy that, put it into a new document, paste it right over here. Let's make it bigger so we can all see what it looks like. I don't have a swatch now in this document with this gradient, so I'm just going to simply go ahead and add that swatch. So now I have this gradient that Von was using in the shape here, which I'll apply to later. Now, in order to do the effect that I'm going to show you, I don't really care what it's filled with. I can actually fill it with just black. So let's just fill it with black. Let's apply a stroke of black, and let's apply a brush. I'm just going to use a basic charcoal one that comes to default with Illustrator. Von actually created his own brushes. I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute. But what I have here now is just a simple black path that has this black stroke applied to it. Let's make it heavier so you can really see the texture of that brush. Like, let's do a 10-point stroke. So now I have this nice kind of organic, totally does not look like vector at all, right? It has the vector path, go into outline mode, but I have this stroke applied to it. Now, of course, like I said before, I could apply a gradient to the fill, but I can't apply a gradient to the stroke. If I click on the stroke and I try to apply a gradient, that won't work because you cannot apply gradients to brushed paths inside of Illustrator. So how do we get around this? Let's just undo and go back to our regular plain black shape. I'm simply going to take the shape. I'm going to select it with my black selection tool. So I have the whole shape selected. And in my appearance panel, take a close look right now. I have a black fill and a black stroke. I'm simply going to go to the object menu and choose a group. It seems a little silly, like I'm taking one object. Normally you group multiple things together, but I'm taking a single object and I'm grouping that single object together. Now that I've grouped it, I'm going to go to the appearance panel. I'm going to add a new fill to the group. I'm going to change the fill of that group to the gradient, and now you can see that I have a single gradient that gets applied across the entire object uniformly. And I have the ability to adjust this, change my brush stroke to be, let's go over here directly into the contents here for a second, go to the stroke, and I could change the width of the stroke to more or less, and can, change it up to a different stroke, so on and so forth, and the gradient is beautiful. So why does that work? How does that simply adding a group here allow me to apply this effect now to the stroke? What magic is going on here? So it's not really magic. I'll just show you over here. You have to really understand what groups are inside of Illustrator. And like I said before, I believe this is one of the most misunderstood features inside of Illustrator. I have a very, very simple construct here. I have two shapes. I just have a single group that I've created here. And I'm doing this just to illustrate the concept of what creating a group actually does inside of Illustrator. I have a blue square and a yellow circle, and the yellow circle has a black brush applied to it. And then I took those two objects and I grouped them together, right? So if you look at my appearance panel, when I select this, it says that I have a group and then I have contents in that group. So this is the important thing to realize. When you create a group inside of Illustrator, a group is an actual physical object. It really exists inside of Illustrator. You don't see it because by default, just like anything else inside of Illustrator, I can only see things when I apply appearances to them, right? If I just draw a regular rectangle and I give that rectangle a no fill and no stroke, right? So the rectangle exists in my document. You can see there, if I go into outline mode, it exists as a path. But if I print my document, nothing will show up in my paper because I have not applied an appearance to that. But the physical construct is here inside of Illustrator. When you take two objects, like in the case here, and then I hit Command G or Control G and I group those two objects together, I am actually creating a third object called a group. Except by default, that group has no fill or stroke applied to it, meaning it has no appearance. And if I took this shape right here, these two shapes, and I kind of did it kind of a cross-section view, I kind of turned it on its side and I viewed it directly from the side, I would see how Illustrator actually draws this artwork in the document. It first basically draws the blue rectangle, then it draws the yellow circle on top of it because that's the way that my stacking order is currently set. And what people don't even realize is that within a single path, fill and stroke attributes are also drawn separately. Illustrator always draws the fill of an object first, so it paints the yellow fill first, and then it paints the black stroke on top of that, right? So then, that was just the regular two shapes that I had. Two shapes plus one of the shapes had a stroke on it. When I took those two shapes and I grouped them, Illustrator created yet another object, except that object, it basically encompasses the entire boundary of those objects that are inside of the group. We refer to a group often as a container, but it's almost like taking like saran wrap or shrink wrap and just completely covering or coating all the elements that are inside of that group. But it does not have any kind of attribute applied to it. By default, a group has no fill and no stroke. But a group is just like a regular shape. You can apply a fill and a stroke to it. So when I apply a fill and a stroke to the group, it applies that fill or that stroke to the entire appearance out of all these elements together, be it strokes, be it painted strokes, be it brushes, be it multiple fills, be it multiple objects. All doesn't make a difference. It's applying that one fill towards that entire shape as if it's all been combined and unified into one element. So if we take again a closer look at what I have here, I have a group, and that group has contents inside of it. If I wanted to double click, I can change my targeting, a whole other discussion for something else. I can now see that there are multiple paths inside of that group, but the group itself has no appearance, meaning that there's no fill, stroke, or appearance or effect that's applied to the group, but there are mixed appearances that appear within the paths that I currently have selected. So let's go back now to the example I was just showing you. If I were to select this right now, I have a group. Now remember, a group is a container. I could put one object into a container. I could put 50 objects into a container. But by simply creating a group of those two objects, I've taken the single path that has both a fill and a stroke, and I've created now a new object that encompasses the surface area of both of those combined. And by applying a fill at the group level, I am now applying an appearance to the group, not to the contents. If I double click on the contents here, you can see that my fill is black and my stroke is black like I was showing before, I can really change it to any color. It doesn't make a difference. I could change it to yellow. You won't see it because it's buried underneath the overall gradient fill that the group has on top of it. So that's the real true power of groups. Groups are a way to apply certain things inside of Illustrator. It doesn't mean that it's just a way to make things convenient by, taking all elements of a single piece of artwork and combining them to one so that it's easier to select. Groups are a physical function that can really tie in an incredible amount of functionality. And just to show you what Vaughn now is able to do with that, like this is ultimately his finished effect, which he posted on his page, Drawing Vector Graphics, in Facebook. And here's also another example of he actually took basically an animated GIF of this is the outline paths, and this is now what it looks like with the brushes applied to it. But he was able to do this because he was able to apply groups and then appearances to those groups, which now makes this not only just all vector so that he can scale to any size, but that he could now go back into the artwork and edit it to his heart's content, as artists always like to do, to make sure that it is exactly perfect to what the client is asking for or how the artist envisions it in their head. So that's the power of groups inside of Illustrator. If you want more details on how groups work inside of Illustrator, my recommendation is to go to lynda.com, because I have a course on this. I'm not trying to do this so that, hey, sell, more content or things like that. I've created enough courses where that's not really what I'm trying to do. I really want people to understand how Illustrator works. Do a search for a series called Illustrator Insider Training inside of Illustrator. The first course in that series is called Rethinking the Essentials. And in that title, I go into detail of exactly what objects are inside of Illustrator, how things work inside of Illustrator, understanding the difference between appearances and paths, understanding the core difference between fills and strokes, and really what appearances are and how the appearance panel is so important inside of Illustrator. And if you get to chapter 4 of that course, you'll see something called Harnessing the Power of Groups, which goes to the core of some of the things that I spoke about today. So hopefully you find that useful. Vaughn, thanks so much for asking that question. I hope everyone has a great day.